So this is going to be a little bit about customer acquisition, which I think is very broad. And part of it is many of you have all kinds of different skills too. So I'm more specifically going to tell you kind of my story and how some of these things work into what I have been doing. But know that if you're doing painting or something, it's going to be a little bit different. So I'm a senior lecturer in architecture and also the principal of Passive Energy Designs LLC, based here in St. Louis. I started Passive Energy Designs in 2009, and that was following the completion of this project, which was a Department of Energy competition that I did as a student at the University of Illinois. And the kind of special thing about this project was it's a passive house, and I know many of you probably never heard that term, but it's a very low energy building. In fact, you can see there are solar panels built into the roof on this side. So this is a zero energy building specifically. So through kind of this process of doing the project, I actually met sort of my first employer, who then became my first kind of client as I started kind of out on my own. So in terms of getting the first client, I think there are many ways to do it, but be aware of like networking, the previous employer, or if you've had clients in the past, that's always a good way to get clients. Repeat clients are something that I personally try to develop. So for me, my business focuses on the energy performance in buildings and working through systems, whether it's like walls, roofs, floors, windows, specifications, things like that, or dabbling in some of the mechanical systems too, especially on single family houses. I may be doing mechanical selections. And so for me, repeat clients are mainly architects that are really focused on designing the projects, doing all of the drawings, but either don't have the expertise or just don't want to spend the time to do all of the energy analysis and performance aspects. So that's a lot of what I do in my business. Occasionally, I will also do my own design projects. But for me, getting a lot of kind of architects that want to use you on every project, or maybe every project that has these energy goals, is a really good way to develop a very sort of steady cash flow, which we're not probably going to cover, but having someone that is going to come back and continue to pay you is a really positive thing. So other first clients that are really common in sort of architecture especially, but I think throughout, are personal relations and word of mouth, doing projects for family, friends, acquaintances, someone where you let everyone know what you're doing, and perhaps someone that knows someone else that needs that service or product. The other kind of way we do that is sort of word of mouth, but through more professional contacts. So like if you do a project where there's a builder or a subcontractor that knows that you were part of the design team, then maybe on the next project they're reaching out to you to perform the same services. Again, sometimes these are other architects that maybe don't want to take on that project or aren't specialized in that type of project, that might pass it on to you. And then the other way to do that is, for clients where you've had no previous contact, where they kind of find you out of the blue. And we'll talk about that a little bit more and how you might kind of generate some of those leads coming up. This is another project I worked on, again, an academic project for a solar decathlon, but this time in Europe. And again, I mean, I was brought in because of my specific expertise in energy efficiency, and essentially brought on to turn this kind of crazy shaped building into a zero energy um, building. And so I'm kind of spacing some of the pictures from some of my projects within this idea of finding clients, but I think it will help you kind of put it together how I find clients and what I'm sort of looking for in some of the clients. So it's a kind of fabric building, pretty interesting. And I bring that up because I was brought onto that project because of the networking and things that I've done, both for my business and some of the teaching that I do. So besides doing energy consulting, one of the other things that I do is professional development training in regards to Passive House. And so the acronyms here are just Passive House Institute US, Certified Passive House Consultant trainings. And I'm one of the trainers that have been doing that again almost probably over a decade now. And that led to the last project because I was doing a training that the Rhode Island School of Design was hosting. And through that, met people there at the school. And when they needed help in my specific area of expertise, I'm the one that they reached out to. So kind of getting out there, either going to trainings too, meeting other people in the class. That's one thing that's nice about these trainings is they might have people that are slightly different than you in terms of what they're focused on. They could be architects, but they might be focused on, single family or multifamily or hospitals or whatever it is. And then when a project comes in that doesn't quite fit them, they might refer that to you. And I think the same thing works in other fields. So the other thing, same kind of deal, is conferences, other meetups and groups. A lot of, especially green building groups, happen around in different cities throughout the country. There's local groups. So if there's a local group that's tailored to, your craft or profession, that's a good place to sort of network. And I also wouldn't discount some of the networking that you're doing just by being nice to your classmates and the people that sit around you in studio and professors and critics and things like that. I mean, I had someone call me just like last week, and one of my repeat clients actually, but he needed another architect to work on some building information modeling, some 3D modeling. And that's something I didn't have the bandwidth to take on for him at that time. But I referred him actually to one of my classmates from school that I know does a lot of that sort of work. So that's always kind of a good way to go through and network. Okay, so here's just a house in Wildwood, Missouri that I worked on again as a sort of energy modeler. And the designer of this house, for those of you that know Derek Hofferlin, was one of the architects that he interned in when he was a student, David Pape Architecture Studio. So I think that's kind of an interesting side note. And it's a completely different look on the inside. But I just kind of want to throw these out there that you kind of find people networking through different ways. And then this was a really interesting project because it had a super deep basement for the rock climbing wall. But how I found this client specifically was through my website. So I have a website. I think if you offer services as a designer, a website can be a pretty critical component to finding and generating client leads. If you sell products, though, you might not need a website. Like if you're only going to sell through Etsy or Facebook or something like that, you may not need a website. I don't do that really, so that's something I think you can look into. I will caution you, just maybe be careful not to go too far down to just one platform. Like if your business doesn't work, if one platform goes away, you may want to maintain some flexibility there. So full disclosure, my website's pretty dated, but we've been working on the updates. So I think that's something to do. And the lesson that I want to impart is don't let your website get too stale. Um, you may have heard the term SEO or search engine optimization. They love new pages and updated pages and new content. So if you don't update your website for a few years, then you're going to kind of drop down the rankings. And so I've actually noticed that I have less traffic now because I've sort of let my website go stale. But most of my work comes from some of the other things that we've already talked about in terms of networking and contacts and referrals. And then the next kind of page after this one, another house that I worked on in Southern Illinois. Again, you can sort of see some of the green features. The homeowner was actually kind of one of the main designers and built it by hand, including hand hewing the timber frame on the interior. And I mention that because a lot of people find me through website directories or professional trade websites. So I mentioned the Passive House Institute US earlier. They have a website directory of everyone that's like passed their training or has their credential. So if there's some sort of professional credential that you have, and there's a way to sort of market that outside of your own website, I've found that to be really helpful. So I have a lot of clients that have this idea like, ooh, I want to build a zero energy passive house. Well, they're finding all the information online about passive houses. And then they look for someone, let's say in Missouri or in St. Louis, and I'm one of a handful of names that pops up of being in that location. So it's really good to kind of use these types of things in a market like St. Louis. It's less useful in like Seattle or New York, where there's 100 people doing that exact same type of thing. So these are really helpful, I think, when you're like differentiating yourself. But if there's already 100 people, doing freelance sculpture or something, then it might not be that big of a difference. I do find the occasional job come through LinkedIn. Usually, again, this is sort of professional networks too. So people can see what your skills are, kind of what you are known for, and then find you there. Okay. Other places where I think it's just good, you can build a brand, it is in forums or, where your clients hang out is a good place to find them, right? So this is especially true with social media, which is kind of one of the next slides. If you're using, Facebook, but you're catering to the demographic that's now spending a lot of time on TikTok, then you're not really, finding your clients where you want to find them. So just be aware of kind of what platforms you're using. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I have not taken out advertising for my business. I have enough business through referrals and other things to not need to do that personally. But I have considered it. I think there's the other thing to kind of mention here is this idea about organic traffic. Like if someone types your name or your website or something or a search term into Google and it pops up your website, that's organic traffic, right? When you see the ads at the top, that's something that someone's paid for. So if you can rank high on a lot of these terms or sites and search engines, and get a lot of this sort of native or organic traffic, then I don't think there's a real reason to take out ads, especially when you're just starting out. I have a big aversion to like debt in terms of, starting a freelance business. Yes, you could go borrow money, but it's probably not the right thing, I think, for most people, unless you know that you have to do it because you have a huge job and you'll pay back the material costs really quickly or something. But in general, I would say, it's kind of off topic now for getting your first client, but part of the reason I haven't run paid ads is because I haven't really needed to, and because I think if you run a more financially fit business where you're not overly leveraged, like I also don't like to feel the pressure of like needing to pay back a loan or anything this month. Like if the invoice doesn't come in, you don't want to be in trouble, right? You want to have that flexibility that if your client's 3 weeks late on an invoice, you don't have these like payments or anything looming over you. And so here's a project that I was involved with at Washington University. Again, a zero energy house, not a passive house per se, but pretty close probably in terms of lots of its performance characteristics. And again, this sort of job, before we switch over to social media, like me just being at Washington University, came through networking. So people at RISD know people at WashU, and that's a really good way to sort of get your foot in the door. So some industries and even academics are pretty small, and a lot of people know who you are, or who maybe your professor or other clients are. So I would just keep that in mind in general, building your brand, that the world's pretty small and interconnected within some of the circles that you're probably looking at with some of your contemporary classmates and things. Okay, so social media, again, go where your customers are. I think you can use all of these to develop a brand and to find clients. You can also use many of them to sort of sell clients. Don't feel like you need to use any or of these or all of them. If you were going to use one, I think the general advice would be to like pick one and master one first, right? The one that might be most useful to your customer demographic, and then go from there. I also think it's important to just know what you are selling. Are you selling a product, a service, an experience? In architecture, we could almost say like it's all of those, right? There's a house, but I'm selling design services. But there's also an experience that the client has throughout this process, which can be very stressful, and because there's a lot of money involved oftentimes, and the clients, when they come to you to build, let's say, a custom home, you probably imagine most of the projects I've shown in this presentation weren't very cheap to be able to build. So I think that experience is sort of helpful, and I wanted to sort of bring this up because how you can kind of answer and frame that question, I believe, leads to what your kind of ideal client is and what you can also charge them. And I would consider this idea of value-based pricing rather than hourly pricing, or if you're doing service kind of work. So for quite a long time, and occasionally I am still doing this in terms of I can provide a service per hour where it's my time. But I think it's better and more profitable if you can provide a fee based on the value you're providing to the client. And also it gives you an incentive to be really good at your job as a freelancer, right? So like, let's say I do this energy model twice as fast as the next guy. If we're both charging hourly, right, we're both making I'm actually making half as much as he was, and then to compensate for that, you would have to double the price that you're going to charge per hour, and then it looks like you're making a whole lot of money per hour, which maybe you are, but I think it's better to provide sort of flat fees, especially if you can be pretty certain you're not going to overrun that in terms of the time and commitment that or even materials that it's going to take, right? That's one thing I've also started to notice is clients also really like the idea that that service or that product is a set amount, right? If they're paying hourly, they don't know how many hours it's going to take, and they enjoy the certainty, of that sort of value-based price. Okay, so some lessons maybe. So in terms of just negotiation, um, I think it's good to know what you can do and what you can't do and stick with it. So you also, and that sort of means like, for me, many of the only times where I've really gotten in trouble or behind is when I've said yes to something that I probably shouldn't have. Or maybe there is a project I originally said no to, and then they were like, "Oh, but you can do it," and I was like, "Well, yeah, I can." And then that became the biggest headache of the past 11 years, from that project. So I think it's just about knowing, how to kind of know what you can do, what you maybe aren't that set up to do, or what you could do, but it'd be too not worth the effort, and stick to it. Make a commitment to know what you're trying to achieve. The next thing is sort of interview your clients, especially if you're a service provider. Like, the things that can really, if you can get a sense from the interview, let's say, that the client's not going to make up their mind ever, right? Or is going to want 10,000 revisions of the design, or any other kind of red flags. Like, I know another architect that asks every client, like, have you worked with an architect before? Like, do you know, what the process is like? And see what they say to that, and make sure that those clients are a good fit for you. And not just that you're good for them. So the other thing I'll just kind of leave you with, though, is that when you're young, you can say yes to everything. And then you learn to say no, so you can focus on what matters and only what you can do or what you do best. I think this is just a good quote in general. You can say yes a lot early on because you can work yourself out of it. It's good to have a broader range of experiences to pull from in the future. And so I think that's always a good thing. But at some point, I think you'll be more profitable, if you can focus on sort of what your strengths are, and how you can leverage them best. All right, I think this is the last slide, and then we're probably getting some chats here. Yep. And you can, okay. So I will say, I think freelancing is difficult. Some things are going to be easier than others. It also depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to just make a couple bucks a week or a month? Make a little extra money around Christmas time or something, or are you planning for a full-time career? So, I think everyone starts at the early part of their career where they kind of struggle. You want to do enough work to make money to live on, and to do that, you have to be doing the work, right, of what you essentially bought yourself a job, not necessarily a business. And then as you progress, you can kind of get to the point where you're building the business over time, and maybe even able to step away a little bit from kind of the day-to-day service of that business. So I feel like this quote is like perfect for how I did my business. Like, I started this 11 years ago, Passive Energy Designs. I mentioned that, in 2009. And that was right when I got out of school, pretty much. It was almost a necessity to actually keep my job because I was moving, but they would allow me to work remote if I, had my own entity and send them invoices. So that's what prompted me to go ahead and make that, commitment to kind of opening up my own shop, because I had that built-in client right away. But what it meant is, like, I, in hindsight, knew virtually nothing about a business. So I feel like building the plane while flying it was kind of what happened. And I will also point out that there are thousands of podcasts, websites, YouTube videos, etc., about many of these kind of things in regards to business freelancing, not just like the technical skill, but also I put the title here, mindset. I really didn't get into mindset; it's way too long. But having the proper mindset to go be a successful entrepreneur, and like I said, there's so many resources out there that I would encourage you all to start to look at some of those. Okay.
This was tremendous, Ryan. Thank you so much for being able to share your experience here. And we'd love for you to be able to stick around. We're going to do some Q&A at the end here. We'd love to be able to toss it over to John Hendrix. He was going to do a 20-minute session with us, and then we'll be opening up for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, feel free and drop them into the chat so that we can have Ryan and John answering your questions. We're going to go ahead and toss it over to you when you're ready, John.
Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Can you guys see that? I got a sheet of paper I'm going to be drawing on. I normally give this lecture in class, and I wish I could draw on a whiteboard in front of you. So that's basically what I'm doing. I don't have any slides, but I am going to draw, so maybe you can help follow along. So I'm an illustrator. I know that what we're talking about today is how you get clients. And I think for many artists, that can seem really intimidating. And actually the last lecture was awesome. And actually I'm going to fill that out a little bit. So I'm going to give you a couple big buckets to think about promoting yourself and getting clients as an artist, as a freelance artist. I come from it as an illustrator. But I think this actually translates to a lot of disciplines in the arts. So I think the first thing to say is that it's really hard to do this, and you can't do it overnight. You have to be patient. So if you are filling out if you had to imagine an enormous like bucket that you're filling up, right? Guys, I went to art school. You're filling up an enormous bucket, and you have a very tiny like eyedropper, right? And the best thing you can do, this is an A+ drawing, guys. The best thing you can do is promote yourself 3 drops a day, right? That's not overwhelming. It feels overwhelming if I told you to fill up that entire bucket in one day, and you just can't do that in one day. So you have to see it as an approach of doing a little bit every day to help put your work out there, to find people who resonate with your work, and to bring you new opportunities. Another important thing to remember in this world is that you are not trying to convince the entire world that you are a genius. To get your start, you need one person that needs to see something in you that has a connection to your work, that will give you an opportunity. And if you think of it as, I'm just trying to find one person out there who can connect to me, give me an opportunity so I can make that work, it seems less intimidating. So when you think about promoting your work, hey, I'm an artist, I make comics or I make prints, how do I find work? I think there's 2 things out there, 2 big buckets. Two big categories to think about when you fill up this bucket, and that is passive promotion and then active promotion. So the passive stuff, if you had to guess, you could probably get there with most of it, right? This is like social media, websites, any kind of things that where if you had to think about this as a group, this is where you cannot control who is seeing the work, right? The eyeballs, you want the eyeballs to come to your work. And I'm not saying that this takes no work to build a social media platform. It does. It is hard. You need to do it every day, and you need to make a brand for yourself. That's absolutely true. But in many ways, this side of the equation, this side is the easy side, and this side is the hard side. This side, you can't control who is seeing your work when. Even if you make the best website, the best Instagram presence, if you're on Twitter and making great TikToks and 1 million people are watching it, you don't know who those eyes are, right? So you do not know how to translate that into getting a job, right? Maybe you're Twitter famous, but no one calls you for jobs and you feel powerless, right? That's because that is a set of passive promotion. You do not control who you are promoting yourself to. And so even though it feels difficult to make a social media presence, and it does take a lot of work, it's actually the easier side of promoting yourself. The hard side is the active promotion. And to me, that is where you will see real growth in your career, but it is much harder to do and it takes more intentionality. So I want us to help fill out this side today. Because I actually think this side is one where we look and we say, this is the secret right now. You got to be on Instagram and you got to have 30,000 followers, and that's going to translate into X number of editorial calls from Time Magazine every year. And in fact, you talk to a lot of people who have massive followings on Instagram, but no commission jobs, right? And that doesn't add up to people. And then they feel depressed and they want to give up. They're like, look at this guy. He's got 30,000 Instagram followers and says he's not getting any work, right? What's the problem? Well, all of this comes down in this side to a big box of relationships. Any kind of work that you're going to have over the course of your career is not a nameless corporation calling you to make work. This whole box is filled with, again, I went to art school. This whole box is filled with people, right? There are people that you are going to connect with. So really, if we think about promoting yourself as an artist, how do you make relationships with people that can last a long time? We actually, as human beings, have a massive capacity for remembering other human beings. Like, think about all the human beings you've ever met. You keep them all separate in your mind, right? And the fear in Instagram is like, I'm just one image among a billion other images. So to me, as you are starting your career, I just want to emphasize that sometimes that gross word of networking sounds like you're being slick, or you're trying to fool people, or you're coming up with some sort of scheme to get people to your website. What networking is relationships and being a human being with other human beings in the industry. And so let's fill out this bucket and think of ways where we can do that. So email, calls, direct mail, conferences. All of these things require you to know who you are sending it to. So the first part is researching and finding the kinds of companies, whether it's publishing firms or magazines or platforms that are making movies that you love, and find who is there. Find the people that are making the stuff and connect with them. Now, I have told people that if you can get the courage to cold call people that you admire in the field, tell them that you love their work and that you're new in the field and you want the chance to have them review your portfolio, that is an incredibly scary proposition to most people. Using the telephone is almost becoming a lost art. But if you can get over that hurdle and some of those fears and start to make connections with people, that's the kind of thing that lasts. Now, there's no silver bullet. There's not one thing that you can do that's going to determine the course of your career. But I think if you can move from, in general, this side to this side as an artist, that you can see in this case, you are controlling and curating and thinking about who is actually seeing your work, right? So if you have a proposal for a comic, right, think about who exactly would be a good fit for that. Go and research different corporations. Go and research different publishing houses, or talk to your friends and your peers. Who do they have connections with, right? In the last lecture, it was talked about your studio friends are some of your best assets right now, because they're going to go out into the field and make connections, and you have connections with them, right? So using your peer group to make relationships possible as you move forward in your promotion. All right. So that's the big picture of, I think, thinking about how we go from passive to active. Those two buckets, I think, can help you think about two different approaches. Now, I think some specifics might be helpful. When I say direct mail, I do believe in mailing physical objects to people. I know that we are in a digital world. You know, I'll tell you a little bit about my start. I started before the internet was a going concern. It was internet 1.0. There was certainly no social media. And I really believe that making those touch points with people in physical forms, you know, whether it's a postcard or sending someone a pencil with your drawing on it, some sort of physical remnant that they can have in their offices and in their spaces, that give them a way to latch on to you and your work. And the more touch points you make with someone over the course of a career, you know, they may not call you for that project the very first time that you contact them. They may not on the second or third time. But I have been to enough offices, design firms, advertising agencies, publications over the years to see giant bulletin boards filled with postcards and things and visual ephemera that has been sent to art directors, and they keep it a long time. And that is different than an email PDF, for instance, or a link to a website, or to remember when you repost your Instagram and it goes to the top of the feed and you get some likes and then it's gone forever, right? And again, those are good. Those are ways where you can imprint your work into somebody's mind. But how do you be the person that comes to the top of the mind when an art director gets a piece in, it's about a teddy bear that gets lost in New York City, and they think, I'm going to call you, right? How does that happen? Well, the more you can place those moments where maybe there's a physical thing in their office that you sent them, right? That they'll see and remember. Maybe they had a conversation with you. Maybe you had an informational interview with them. All these things, again, add up to giving you more opportunity to be the person that comes to mind when you're proposing, when you're getting that call, like looking for that first big break. So another thing I want to talk to is sort of thinking about, if you're sending out this, if you're thinking about who are these people, right? Who are the people here, right? The people you want to connect with. I think as artists, we tend to think of the major players as being a particular kind of person, right? Like who is the gatekeeper, right? Who is the person that will determine my future? Well, I think if you ask most people, they would say like, oh, it's got to be an editor, right? Or an art director. And that's certainly true. An editor, if you're looking to work at Wired magazine, and you open the masthead page, or the front page of the magazine, and you look at the art department section, who's going to be on top? You know, Scott Dadich, design director, right? He's the big fish. Now you can send him a postcard. You can send him this amazing zine that you made on the Risograph, and I think you should, right? I also think you should send it to the art director. I also think you should send it to the senior designer. I think you should send it to the junior designer and to the design intern. All I'm saying with this is that in any particular company, there are a lot of people that are going to be making work and commissioning work. Early on in my career, I would go to a magazine and find every person who worked in the art department. And I would send them a postcard. And on the back, I would just write a note to their name. And I remember I found somebody in Rolling Stone, and they were a junior designer, but they were listed on the masthead. And so to send them, imagine you're a junior designer and you get a postcard sent to you of someone's work, right? That's going to leave an impact. That's going to leave a connection that you're going to remember down the road. Maybe it's the first time any kind of mail has come to them as a way of promotion, right? Now, is one postcard going to make your career? No, but again, you're building relationships with people. You're trying to say at the end of the day, hey, the art director, I am providing a service to the art director. The art director is not providing a service to me. So when you're putting your work out there, you got to think in terms of what they need, right? If what they are looking for is a particular kind of work, then you should be sending that kind of work to them. And that shows them that you know and understand their clients or their base of editorial content. You understand what their magazine's about, and you're going to be more likely to get that first call. So I don't think you have to be intimidated with the idea that in order to get work, like how many of, if I want to make some calls, if I want to send out some postcards with a great drawing on it, how many of those do I need to send, right? In our mind, I think you probably think the best number is between 5,000 and 10,000 cards to send out, for example. Now, I think if you'd said emails, you could actually do this in any form, right? And whether it's emails or cards or how many touch points do I need to have? Any direct mail company will tell you that if you get a 1% response on a mailer, that's like phenomenal, right? But I'm just going to tell you that the best way to predict the fit and the response of your work is to curate who you send your work to, and to look for places that fit with your both the form of your work and the content of your work. Are they publishing people like you? Are they publishing people that have the same editorial content as you? And if you can find 30 places that you want to work and send 10 things, cards, emails inside of that publication, that's 300 touch points that you can put out. And honestly, that may feel like a lot, but that's very doable. I mean, that takes some effort, but if you can do that 2 or 3 times a year on top of, investing in a conference, investing in travel to go and be together with other professionals in your discipline, it feels very expensive coming out of school. Believe me, I know conferences are not cheap, but they are very valuable because you have to see service to your field and the participation in the community of your field as part of what it means to be a member of that world. And so again, the magic sauce to me is you are not building a career, you are building relationships. And early on, it felt overwhelming. But now looking back, I can think of most of my jobs now come through people that I would count as friends, actually. People who I would count as peers and who I've seen for many years. We've worked together. Yes, of course I get calls from people that are brand new who have not worked with me before. But the phenomenon of working in this field a long time is that you really only have to hustle for the first 5 years if you're doing this right. And this is what I found. The analogy that I use, this is going to be awful. So, did you ever watch the lumberjack games on ESPN? So there's log rolling is this phenomenon on the ESPN games, the lumberjack games. And there's you got to stand on top of this log that's floating in the water and stay on it as long as you can. And it is like a mad scramble to get up to the top of the log, right? Let's see, let's draw a guy with a beard and little mittens. But what's amazing is it's this mad scramble to get up on top of the log, and they're all fighting to get up on top of it. But then once they get up on it and they're balanced, it's actually just like a very calm, regulating move forward, right? And that's a very tortured analogy to say that you have to really hustle and scramble early on in your career to make those relationships, to pound the pavement, to take some risks, to cold call an art director that you've always wanted to work with. And once you're on top of the log, then it's about doing work. The work that you do becomes the self-promotion to get more work. So it's really early on where you have to be patient, you have to be persistent, and you have to try things that are risky and hard. And then once you start making work and you make those networks and get those relationships, it becomes a lot easier. I have not sent out cards or done active mailers now for 15 years. But the first 5 years, it was a regular part of my life of building that client base. So I'll also just end on a note and say, this is hard and in some ways can feel very intimidating, but it's also very doable. It's also small steps that you can take sort of one day at a time. And that's the starting place. Is don't feel overwhelmed. Just fill up the little bucket every day, 3 drops in the bucket every day, and you'll get there. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was great. We really appreciate your presentation, and I hope everybody's feeling a little more filled up and excited for what's ahead. We want to be able to open up for questions. So Ryan and John are here. If you guys have any questions, want to drop anything into the chat, if you would prefer to come off mute and ask, feel free. We would love to be able to share their experience with you. We are going to be taking a break at about 5 minutes to 3. So we would love to be able to open it up for questions.
While we wait, then I'll just mention that I think John said it maybe more eloquently than I did, but that's exactly what I've seen in my business, is that the networking is a huge component. All the relationships are how I've gotten to where I've been. And yes, I have that website and some other things, but the conversion rate, right, is much lower. And so I think just starting out, he hit it right on the head. And I'll also kind of say, like, you can work for someone too while doing some of this, especially in architecture. Like, you need to get hours in, internship hours, experience in different project types under someone that knows what they're doing. That's a good way to start out, which gives you some time, right, to put those little drops in the bucket. So I think it's really difficult to go from 0 to full-time salary, right, the next day. Without having built up some of those relationships over time.
That's great, Ryan. And we did have a question come in on the chat. So one of our Scandalera Center innovation interns, Yoel, had a question. If your work is revolved around video content, do you have any recommendations of how to send tangible hard copy material to people that you want to connect with? So Yoel's working on some videos with us, utilizing our platform with the Scandalera Center, and just curious how she might be able to get her work out there in front of the right people.
Yeah, such a good question. Yeah, a lot of my commentary was based on ephemera, right? Printable materials. I actually think you can still send a really formally beautiful still to somebody on a postcard and have a link that says see the whole video here. Or of course there's digital versions of active promotion too. Targeting someone in an email that's not a mass email. I mean, don't send it to 400 people at once. Send it to one person, name them. Just listen, here's the rules. Number 1, compliment them, right? Number 2, demonstrate what they do. And then 3, ask for some small piece of feedback. So like, dear art director, Rolling Stone, first of all, I'm a huge fan. I've followed your work since the 1990s. I love when you do X, Y, and Z. 3, I'm a brand new illustrator. I'm right out of school. I make animated GIFs. Like, here's one of them. Do you have 5 minutes to talk to me about what it takes to be an illustrator in your platform, right? Like, get in and out. Don't send 6,000 words. But also be kind and complimentary and demonstrate, some competence, and that will work. It will work.
Thank you very much. Hi, I had a question. First, thank you so much, Ryan and John, for sharing. It was really helpful. I was really interested, Ryan, with your talk about pricing based on value versus hours. And I kind of was just curious to hear some more like just to hear more about that. I know that sometimes the advantage of going with hours is that sometimes people don't know how long it takes, especially when you're, I guess, not working with people who are illustrators or designers, and they might underestimate the time it takes. And then sometimes when you base it on value, you might undersell or oversell, especially when you're starting out. So just thinking about that strategy of time and value and pricing.
And
Yeah,
it,
I'll
go ahead,
let
Jeff.
Ryan jump in here. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, Ryan. I'll let you jump in real quick. I think designers and illustrators make a huge mistake if they bill hourly, because it de-incentivizes efficient work, right? But you should know your hourly rate so that you can bill a project rate correctly, right? So if you graduate and you have an undergraduate degree in design or illustration, you should be charging a minimum of $75 an hour as your hourly rate. It probably should be higher. But if you think like you've been asked by your uncle to design a wine label for his, at-home winemaking, right? The uncle's a bad example because that's always fraught with problems. But say this project's going to take me 6 hours. I'm gonna in my mind take 6 hours times $100 an hour. That's $600, and then give that project fee to the client. And then if they don't want to do it, you can actually add 15% as almost like go away money, right? So if you're not going to be happy with it, you get the rate you're happy with, and you're not settling.
Yeah, I think that's there's like three ways to do it: hourly, then this way that John's saying, which I think is definitely a step improvement to that, and then there's like the next level, which is knowing what that's worth to the client. So I'm assuming Coca-Cola will pay more, right, than your uncle, and because there's value there and that design. So if you can start to hit that for the client and what they're willing to pay, that's a way to go to too. And I know that's something I'm still working on, because not like every, let's say, house even is going to be the same, right? There are houses that are $2.5 million, and there are houses that are $200,000, and it doesn't make sense for me to like charge the same, right, on those sorts of projects either, because there's value, and people will see the value. In the more expensive projects, they can actually save more energy because they're bigger, more expensive houses. There's actually more value to my service there, and so ideally you'll be able to charge more for that. But I think what John said is 100% true in terms of efficiency. I know I'm fast. I've been doing it 10 years. There are people that are just going through like this training to do some of the same things I do, and it takes them 3 times longer than me. So why should I make a third less than them, which is what would happen if we were all billing at a hourly rate.
Thank
Those are
you.
great points. And we want to thank John, Ryan, for you presenting to us today.